This is DT Grant and the Practice Podcast, the place where we dive deep into the hidden world of healers. Back again after about a 9-month respite because of many things I had to take care of in my life. Today, I'll be interviewing a woman named Alexia Silva, who was trained as a psychotherapist and worked with hospice for many years as a bereavement counselor. She works as an end-of-life doula, has Reiki training, and now currently offers intuitive guidance and mediumship.
Please take me to that other place. You make me feel in another way. I've tried to find
And now, welcome Alexia Silva. Hi, there you are.
How are you?
Good, how are you? Good, we finally connected. It's like,
It worked out.
first, I'm going to start with an example of part of a session that I did with Alexia that was an intuitive counseling session.
All right, I think we can begin. So I want to start with your origin story in contrast to the you now. It feels very far away from each other. You said you're an osteopath. You are a healer, but you focus on the bones and the body. That has been the safest way for you to be a healer, but you are actually a spiritual healer. You've taken a long road around and around and around to know you don't need your hands and you don't need to work with the physical body, but you've established this system where this is what you're doing and you're not sure how to make that transition. This is about finding that place in your soul that believes and knows that your healing powers are much more vast than you have allowed them to be. Your space of belief is like the size of a quarter, and we need to expand that out so that your whole system believes it. You know all of this. It's just the one thing is missing. Like, what's that one thing that's going to flip the switch? That doesn't exist outside of you. Again, you know this. Is this tracking so far?
Absolutely.
And the healing, it's like just simmering inside of you, just waiting, 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 waiting. The dam will open when you feel safe.
After talking more about connections and different kinds of relationships in my life, Alexia then moved on to my athletic background.
Did you ever have a pretty nasty fall when you were running and face plant into the track?
I've had many falls, but I can't say it was running. I sprained my ankle, but I actually had a really bad fall recently snowboarding.
Oh gosh. Was there an impact where you got the breath taken out of you?
Yeah, and I thought I was going to be paralyzed.
Oh, okay. So this has to be what's coming through. My mind went to what you did for the most part with the running, but if it's something more recent, that makes more sense to me. That this idea of unexpected impact, because I don't think you're new to this. This was not inexperience, right? It was almost the opposite.
I'm a very good snowboarder, and I was videotaping my daughter, and I was barely moving, and I flew up, somehow landed flat on my back. I fractured my sacrum, but it was more that my sacrum now is out of place.
Okay. It's not a coincidence that it's your sacrum. This is a place of previous injury for you in that chakra. So just focusing on the sacral chakra as the tender point of your spiritual healing. There's some deep need for you to go into that energy point.
After she talked in depth about my sacral injury and how it may be connected to other things in my life, She then moved back into details about my spiritual work.
Your work is healing and you are benefiting so many people. You're craving to go deeper. It sounds like a cliche, but you have been on the surface, literally like hands on the body, on the skin. You can't go any deeper than that. But your soul is like wanting your hand to like blend through their body and get to the core of it. Do your work, send the healing, but don't get the ego involved in trying to say, like, I'm doing this, I'm thinking this, I'm processing this, I'm going to choose to put my hand here because I know that they need this flow of energy. That's ego.
Yeah, in osteopathy, we talk about we're not fixing you. Something is.
It's not about you. You've never felt that it's about you. It makes you uncomfortable for it to be about you. This is all in step with you finally coming to a point where you just surrender to your gifts that came by the long way home, which I can tell you is usually the only way to do it.
That was a small snippet of about a 50 to 60-minute consult with Alexia. Now let's carry on into our interview. Do you want me to just start jumping into questions? And I
Yeah,
don't know. I mean,
you can just go ahead and
okay. So, looking at your background, did you start as a therapist with a focus on end of life training? Is that how you began?
I did, yes. I got a master's in counseling psychology and focused on trauma and end of life care, and went from that to working in hospice. So the beginning of my career was really primarily working end of life and as a bereavement counselor at an inpatient hospice facility.
Was there a reason you were more drawn to end of life?
For me, there are a lot of reasons. There's always the journey that takes you where you end up. Part of my story is having had a lot of my own personal loss from a very early time. So that was part of the fabric of my life. I knew that my first experience with hospice as a family member, it just changed the whole story of our experience as a family. And after that, I knew that it was something that was so critical. So that was kind of the catalyst. And then, the journey took me to a beautiful hospice company. And once I was settled, I knew that's where I had landed for a reason.
So, did you have hospice throughout all ages?
Yeah. Most of the work that I did was with adult patients. I would work with the patients themselves and their family members going through the end of life process to support them all. And the beautiful thing is that you already had a relationship with the patient. So once they passed, I could more intimately support the family, having known them and known the story and been there for that entire process.
Well, definitely with hospice, I imagine there's a lot of relaying difficult things. Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, it's really understanding just being present with somebody and going through it gently. Right? There are different ways to share information, but you always have to be honest as well. And I can think of times where I have known something that I really didn't want to say. But if I'm receiving some information, it's my obligation to do that and to do it gently. I always struggle when people don't tell the truth. I always want to know the truth. So it's about understanding how to present it and to be there to support them as they're processing the information that they're hearing.
What sort of transformation have you seen in people who you went through this with?
Of course, every story is unique and some were more difficult than others. The most poignant memories that I have are when the family member who is going through the end of life process have come to a place together of acceptance and are using the time that they have in the most beautiful way. So rather than focusing on the stressors or the finances or medical decisions, they've come to a place of peace. So they are having family gatherings. They're listening to their favorite music. They're watching their favorite movies. They're sitting outside watching the leaves fall. Those beautiful moments that are sometimes forgotten when we're in a stressful, a traumatic situation like that. But being able to spend that time together, I encourage them to say all the things, write letters if they need to. There have been beautiful experiences of the patient writing their family members each a letter that then is delivered after they die. Those are the precious moments that if you have time and guidance, you can prepare for and ease the process of leaving the world.
So you said you're an end-of-life doula, and I'd only heard of doulas for childbirth. So what is an end-of-life doula?
Yeah, so doula is the Greek word for helper. And so we are most familiar with it, again, with birthing doulas, but we bring life into the world as a birthing doula and we guide them out as an end-of-life doula or a death doula. It's really as simple as being a helper, just offering your presence, offering your guidance, being able to answer questions. Also, most of the times that I really knew that this was something so important was when there wasn't a family present. And so there were many, many times where I was sitting vigil with a patient who unfortunately didn't have anybody there. So spending those final days, hours, moments, just being present, even if they were unconscious, for me, knowing that somebody was sitting with them patiently and just present as they were preparing and their body was shutting down. So those are the moments that really stay with me, being able to kind of be present when someone doesn't have the family that many of us are blessed to have.
So doing that kind of work, what has it added to your life?
It's a great question. The most significant shift is when you have an intimate relationship with death and dying, you tend to start living your life a little bit differently. For a lot of us, death is this thing that we know is coming, but we just don't think about it. We don't talk about it. It just happens and we move on. So part of the work of wanting to support people through this is not only so that they can understand how to continue living after someone they love dies, but to change the way that they're living, right? To have that constant reminder of the finite state of being human and that it's ultimately not just this time, this human self, right? That's how it shifted for me, and I try to share that as much as possible with those that I work with.
I had a very close friend of mine who was young and wasn't going to make it, but she was low 40s. Her mother-in-law encouraged me to help get hospice on board, and it was terrible where she was in complete denial, and I imagine you have experienced a lot of that, but then also the other. Would you say the majority of people it was a process, or do you feel like many are accepting and more ready?
Most, I have to say, were not ready. One of the downfalls of our medical system now is that when someone, even if they know that it's likely terminal, the medical system, the physicians wait till the very last minute to just sort of surrender and transfer patients to hospice care. The ideal scenario is to have as much time as possible. It really does shift person to person. Often the patient is the first one to accept before the family. Most of the time, the family wants to do everything possible, and the patient knows their body and knows what's happening. So it's a lot of navigating all the different family dynamics and the illness itself, the uncertainty of that.
I definitely saw that in the hospital, in the intensive care, and it was always the patient was done, but the family didn't want to let go. So you also have Reiki training. How do you use this, or how have you used it with your work?
So The Reiki training that I have, for me, I wanted to understand energy and understand how we heal through energy. I believe that the energy is always flowing out. So in every conversation that I have, every client that I sit with, I believe that that Reiki training is in action. And so whether it's sitting with someone and setting that intention, or even distance Reiki where I'm in my own space, my own meditation, and I'm sending that energy out to friends, family, or to patients or clients. That's how I use it.
I have a question about disease processes developing as the result of someone's state of mind or things going on in their lives or stress level. If someone is really unhappy in their life, that disease manifests in their body as a result of them not living out their truth. Do you have any reflection, thoughts about that idea from your experience?
Sure. I certainly have seen in many, many cases where the body responds to the energy that the person is living. So whether it is self-induced trauma or trauma that was put upon them, the cells of the body, they vibrate at a different frequency. And so when we are exposed or around experiences that are low vibration, the body responds to that, and on a cellular level. And so, of course, this is not the case every time, but I have met too many people who have developed cancer, for example, and had a long history of trauma in their lives. And they themselves have been able to identify that cellular shift that happened in the body that sort of made the body more vulnerable to something like cancer. And then, we look at people who suffer and struggle with addiction. It seems self-imposed, but 99% of the time it's coming from some past trauma that they're not able to remove from their energy. And again, that brings us to a lower vibration, unfortunately, and kind of continues the cycle. So certainly there is an absolute correlation from the years that I've been doing this work and have seen firsthand how the body responds.
So it's shifting to your intuitive readings and you do mediumship. Did you always have a gift? Did you tap into that gift?
Yes, so I've always been a sensitive since I was my earliest memories as a child, very intuitive, very psychic, and it was something that I didn't know was different. I didn't know that not all kids were feeling and sensing these things or knowing things about people. So it became just who I was, the way that I understood myself. When I decided to go into the hospice work, that was when my abilities opened up a little bit more because I was living in that realm every day. What was so significant for me with the bereavement counseling was that I was helping people to continue their relationships even after their person had left the physical world. And that was the key that really turned things for me. We're understanding, how do we continue that relationship?
Sorry, continue the relationship with the person who's passed?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You're asking someone to have a relationship with someone who's no longer here. We are energy, and energy does not disappear. So it has to shift somewhere, right? And we don't know exactly where that is, but certainly the energy of us still exists. I really wanted to explore that more and understand it for myself and for all of my many people who are in the spirit realm. I wanted to still be connected to them. I believe we all come inherently into the world with the ability to connect to spirit, to have intuitive insights. The ability that I have was born into me, but then fostered through my life and training.
So you said you had a mentor. What did your mentor do?
She's amazing. Jackie, she was this angel that found her way to me, and I found my way to her, and she would give me guidance on ways to meditate, to connect. She would guide me into understanding what questions to ask and how to understand the information that was coming through. She was a pivotal in my confidence to understand that I could do this even, because there's always that question, right? Like, what is happening? And to have a guide like her was a blessing.
And so you said she helped you to understand what questions to ask. Are you asking the spirit world? Are you asking a person?
Generally, the way that I can describe the process of connecting is that I'm receiving through all of my intuitive abilities. So those are the abilities that we all have. So clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, clairsentience, clear feeling, clairaudience, clear hearing, and claircognizance, clear knowing. So those are the four main intuitive tools that we use. Now, when I'm set the intention to receive information through those tools from the spirit realm, there isn't an exact process, but I'm shifting my awareness to that realm and I'm allowing my intuitive receptors to sense and feel that realm. That's the space that the energy exists, and that imprint of the people that you know comes through. And it comes through in the form of images or words or sensation, emotion. And then once you kind of get connected to someone in particular, you can have a conversation with them. And so I am sitting across from someone who I'm working to connect for them, but I'm also having a conversation telepathically with the spirit and asking them, what do you need me to know? How can I help? I want to be in service to the spirit realm. So that's where the questions come in. It becomes sort of organic when you've been doing it for this long, but there is a process of having a conversation.
Are you more clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant, or what was the last one?
Claircognizant, right? That's sort of the
Claircognizant.
gut feeling that you get. For me, my strongest clair has always been the clairsentience. I was one of those kids that everyone was like, "You're so sensitive." Like it was this, this negative thing, and now I know it's really a superpower to understand people in the world. So my clairsentience is what I rely on because I'm feeling emotions. I'm feeling the essence of a relationship. Sometimes I'm feeling things in my body. So I'm feeling symptoms that someone may have had or a pain in my head to identify a glioblastoma tumor. And so the information is being moved through my physical body and through my energy body to understand the feelings that are significant. You want to have that emotional connection because that's what people recognize about their loved ones.
It's interesting. Sometimes when I treat people, I get weird feelings in my body. And it took me a while to make the connection that what I was feeling was also going on with my patient. I need to pay more attention.
Yeah, just being aware that it's there. And the most important thing is trusting it. Once you start to trust that your body is actually really looking out for you and giving you messages, whether it's in the physical world or in the spirit world, we have all the tools to receive so much more information than we are remembering or aware of. We're relying so much on all this crazy electronics, and we have the most magnificent system already in place. So when you know that you can read a space, read a person, and rely on it, it changes your life because you can, just as you said, you can walk into a space and immediately be like, nope, this is not okay, and walk out. And the same with people. I'm very vigilant with who I get close with. When you can have that fine-tuned energy reading, you can protect yourself more.
Yeah, I bought this house in Maine. I was 25, and I only lived in the house for maybe 6 months. I was always scared. It was a 3-family. And then one of my last tenants asked if it was haunted. I was like, oh, that would make sense.
Right. Nobody wants to believe that or think it, but yeah,
I mean,
certainly. Spaces really do hold an imprint of energy and
yeah.
yeah.
So when I did a reading with you, it was incredibly accurate. I feel your work is really healing. Well, I feel like knowing your true path and where you're going is where you find your health. And if you're off your path, you're not doing what you're supposed to. And I think sometimes we get so far off, it's like, how do I get back? So that feels very healing. Do you identify with that from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a word I like to use about like being in alignment with self. And when you're not in alignment, or as you said, like sort of living your purpose, things don't feel right. and your body's sick, your mind is confused, and a lot of people live in that state their entire lives. So if you have an opportunity to just pause, but having someone else who can sit with you and sort of understand the motivations or understand your energy needs and give you that guidance to get back into alignment. People recognize that right away. They recognize that like aha moment where something clicks and they say, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about it like that. That is just enough to kind of put you back on the right path, and that familiar feeling of ease is what a lot of us are missing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have specific stories you want to relate where you saw changes that they might have made as a result of your reading?
Sure, yeah.
Your guidance?
I love being able to work with people more than once because just for that reason. With the clairvoyant work or the clairsentience, we're working on a shifting energy. So when I see you every week for a few months or every other week for a few months, we're together kind of walking the path. And I'm not just kind of giving you guidance and then sending you on your way. I want to kind of follow up and see what are the questions you have. What guidance do you need after you've processed some of this information? The most beautiful thing to see is someone who has found themselves again. Mm-hmm. That's certainly something that I needed to do and have set myself back on the path many times in my life. This feels like this particular point in my life, I feel like I'm really as close to me as I have been. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize is there, that there is a true self that gets kind of pushed aside from the world that we live in, the family that we're born into, the traumas that we have, the challenges, all of that gently over time shifts us away from our true self. And finding that is, I think, one of the most important things we can do.
Totally. I agree. I know life is full of every emotion, happiness, sadness. We can't expect life to always be happy and good. I felt like for years I've needed change. How do I make that change? And now that I actually am making a big change, I'm so much happier all of a sudden. But it's been this sort of like, I'm stuck in this path. How do I get out of this path? Do you have any feelings about how much is okay to have a negative feeling? And then when is it a sign to move on?
Yeah, certainly. We are human. And so we are meant to experience every element of human nature. Most of us are in a space where we are aware that there's highs and lows, but sometimes people really do end up kind of on this dropped down, lower energy. Most of the time it's their life circumstances and the people around them. If somebody has found their way to a job or a career that they thought was what they were supposed to be doing, and that's the path that they took, and they spent all these years doing it. And then they're there and they realize, why am I not happy? I spent all this money on, going to law school, but it just doesn't feel right. And then we start to internalize it, like, what's wrong with me? Why do I not feel happy? But ultimately, they were guided by the wrong things, or maybe they shifted through that process. But once you realize that, and the hardest part is being brave enough to step out of the life you created and to take that risk, because it's a risk to shift that dramatically. But once you do that and you take that step and you leave that path that you realized was not the right one for you, and you find the place you're supposed to be, then everything makes sense. Taking that risk alone is really hard. But when you have somebody or a tribe, your family, your friends, to support that rather than push against it, that's all we're here for, is to try and figure out why we're here. What are we supposed to be doing? How can we best live our lives? And if you followed a path and you're unhappy, you got to leave that path and try a different road. And hopefully you have the ability to do that and the circumstances to do that.
It's interesting, I think about the path of becoming a doctor and how it's such a huge chunk of your life and how miserable it was for me.
Yeah.
But I could not be what I am entirely now and have people have faith in the things that I want to talk about and teach if I didn't choose that path. So it's like, hey, I did this. I hated it, but I got through it, and now I want to talk about this. And I think it will help people believe more in what I want to say, but I don't know if it was the right path. Should I have gotten off that path?
Ultimately, you were supposed to go to a certain point to give you all of the experience in the background. I feel that way with my counseling degree. I didn't intend to become a traditional psychotherapist, but I wanted to understand people. I wanted to understand the mind. And I think that's the same thing that you needed to do. You needed to understand the body.
As osteopaths, we talk about grounding ourselves so that we don't let whatever we're treating come in and stick in our bodies. And I imagine you have to have a way to work with that as well.
Absolutely. It's critical. And I think there are a lot of people who haven't learned how to do that, and they get sick doing this work. They get burnt out. In the early days, I would get migraines after spending a day of readings, and that was my body saying, you're holding on to this. This doesn't belong to you. So my practice was really understanding that I was just the vessel, and I was allowing the energy, the information to move through me. So it would kind of come in, I would speak it out, and then it would leave. And so I wasn't holding on to it. Because I do that so intentionally, I won't remember. Most anything I won't remember from a reading after sort of a week goes by. So it does involve me consciously understanding that the energy is coming in or the information is coming in. I'm just being used as a vessel, and then it has to go back out again.
Do you have anything you want to add that you feel I haven't asked?
You've asked some great questions. I think, my entire purpose for doing this work is just to give people an example of how to live better, right? How to interact with the world from a higher plane. We're all living in a space now that is confusing and tricky and sometimes feels hopeless. But what we can do is to keep our own space, our own body, our own vessel at the highest vibration possible, and to then pass that to those one by one who we interact with on a daily basis and guide them to lift up. And if we can all do that just with a few people, that wave will shift. That's the goal, kind of being aware that we are spiritual beings. But to become familiar with your spiritual self, your true self, your higher self, and live with that intention first and foremost.
It's great advice. So I call this the Practice Podcast, and I like to ask people what their practice is, whether it's spiritual, self-healing, whatever that is.
I have a few. Certainly being in nature for me is really important. Having a sort of sanctuary that I can come home to, that's critical for me, especially receiving energy and working with energy. And I need to have a safe space to kind of retreat to. So I've made my home that space and love to spend time just quietly sitting by the fire and drinking tea and just being still. And then prayer, meditation, those are all kind of integrated into my life. And just spending time just being human as well, right? Like not always living in this world of the spirit realm or the energy realm, just doing real human things and spending time with friends, and the balance of reminding ourselves that we are still human, we are spiritual beings, but we are human as well, and to live that human experience.
Nice. So thank you. That was a lot of good information. This concludes the 9th interview of the Practice Podcast. I'd like to thank Alexia Silva for joining me today, for answering my questions, for her honesty, and her clarity and her calm presence. I'd also love to thank Liza for referring me to her. And I'd love to thank the band Modera Cayenne for their amazing song. If you'd like more information, please visit www.thepractice-podcast.com and follow me on the Practice Podcast. This is DT Grant, wishing you a magical and inspiring journey towards health. Thanks for listening.